history was made in Lagos State on Wednesday as Lagos State Governor Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu formally stepped into the coach of a newly completed Lagos Blue Line and took the first trip aboard the electric-powered rail infrastructure. The governor led his deputy, Dr. Obafemi Hamzat, amongst other dignitaries. Of course, on the ride from the National Theatre Station to the iconic station in Marina. It is worthy to mention that for the first time, a rail infrastructure traversed the western part of the state and Lagos Island. The completed tracks spanning 13 kilometers in the first phase extended from Mile 2 to Marina, covering 5 stations. But let's bring insights about this and really understand what this is and highlight the workings and operations of the newly completed Lagos Blue Line ahead of its commencement of passenger operations slated for the first quarter of 2023. I introduced him earlier. He's also a friend of the house, public affairs analyst, Mr. Bolao Olojede. Thank you so much. It's good to have you in the studio.
Nice to be here.
Compliments to the season.
I wish you the same.
Yes, and let's start with this Blue Line. Interesting stuff. I was able to also see the governor yesterday, and I congratulated him. I had the opportunity to do that. But we hear it's 27 kilometers. We hear it's 13 kilometers. And some say it's from Kokomaiko to Mile 2 area. Some say it's Mile 2 to Marina. Can you just tell us more details about this?
Okay, the Blue Line is actually a 27-kilometer rail line. But there are 2 phases to it, a phase 1 and a phase 2. There's the Mile 2 to Marina phase, and there is the Kokomaiko to Mile 2. Those are the 2 phases. So what the governor was celebrating a couple of days ago was the Mile 2 to Marina end. The construction has been completed.
Okay, so that's exactly what was happening on that very day. But this started since, and I think Governor Baba Tunde Fashola did the groundbreaking ceremony. I think I remember clearly. Funding, we hear, is about 100% Lagos State government. How did that happen? IGR? Or where did these funds come from?
Well, when you talk about funding,
yes.
The bottom line is that whether it's the World Bank, because at some point the World Bank was involved, then you also have local banks that came into play after a while. So the local bank, Fidelity, Access Bank, and what's the other one? Sterling Bank.
Sterling.
Those 3 banks came into play later on. But at the onset, there was also the World Bank. Anyhow you cut and dice it, it is on the balance sheet of Lagos State government. So it is correct to say Lagos State has funded it. You know, so if you borrow money, you will pay from whether it's your IGR or FAC, whatever your revenue source is.
You must pay.
You must repay. So I think the way Lagos State like to present it is to make people know that, look, we funded this. This is Lagos State project, not a federal project. In the sense that in most part of the world or in most part of Africa, this kind of project are centrally funded by the central government. But in this particular case, Lagos State is putting this or has put this on its own balance sheet.
That sounds interesting. The differential cash reserve requirements, that kind of agreement to complete this first phase, you mentioned the banks now, Sterling and Access and Fidelity. What does that scheme, what does it mean? You know, at the time, the federal government too had one funding scheme to one way or the other. What does this mean for the state?
Okay, that's what you call the cash reserve ratio.
Yes.
The central bank requires the banks
yes.
to keep a certain portion
yes.
of their deposit in liquid assets with the bank, with the central bank. Now, this fund is sterile. You can't use it to create loan. You can't use it it's just with the bank there. It's more like, let me just hold this as a reserve for that bank. Now, what CBN did under this differentiated cash reserve ratio was to allow these 3 banks that indicated interest in participating in the funding to say, look, for you, we can allow you to use part of that fund that would otherwise be sterile with us to fund that project. So CBN had a framework. There's a guideline for allowing banks to be able to use that portion to provide financing. So they got the approval and they were able to fund.
Indeed. But let's now look at the long period of implementation. You know, I said 2010 to 2022. That's about 12 years. Now, so how long do you think it will take to complete the entire Blue Line all the way to Kokomaiko. Kokomaiko is after Iyanoba. You're going through Barracks.
It's actually about
Ojo.
14 kilometers that you have
Yes.
at that axis.
Yes.
12 years is a long time. I think the groundbreaking by the former governor Fashola was 12 years ago, thereabout. And I believe that the lessons that have been learned in this first phase will help the government to be able to implement the other phases much faster than what has happened. So, of course, the terrain is fairly difficult. The state spoke about issues of wreckages, ship wreckages. These things are, most of these pillars are standing inside water. There are need to relocate cables, relay telecoms cable, this cable, that cable, all sort of things have to be done. But normally, what one would have expected is that, okay, that will have also been part of the planning of the project. So whatever the case is, what is more important is that it is believed, or I believe personally, that Lagos State will have learned from how long it took this to happen, and the lessons will be taken on to the other ones to ensure that it will not drag as much as it. Of course, there is a funding issue as well. Like I said, it's a huge project, and not in many parts of the world do you have state government funding that kind of a project. So both in terms of funding, the technicalities involved with execution, like all those, I want to relocate this, relocate that, will be better taken on the lessons from this 13 kilometers that's been completed.
Very interesting stuff. I'm well aware that this will move at least about 500,000 people, not more than 250,000 people.
Yeah.
I think the figure is around 500,000. Please, let's get that right. But the blue line, according to sources, is environmentally friendly.
Correct.
Looking at the electricity stuff and all of that. But how do you think that will stay? How do we sustain that in this part of the world? Do you think we can sustain this kind of system with our infrastructure?
The biggest fear of most people had been, this is electric train.
Yes.
We don't even have power. Of course, at the conceptual stage for this project, the government knew it would need a dedicated power. You're not going to power this on NEPA. Definitely. So there's a dedicated IPP, independent power project, for this, for the rail. So the issue of epileptic power supply, this and that, does not happen. Those kind of power sources will also even have inbuilt issues that can handle redundancy and all the rest. So it is believed that this kind of a project will run once it starts to run, because of the dedicated power source that has been put in place.
So, but at the moment, what has happened now is the commissioning of we talked about the
it's the completion of construction.
Construction. Yes, that's where I'm going. Now, when do we now think it will really get operational? We hear early next year. Tell us about that. What is next? What is the next stage? What's the next process?
Well, according to Lagos State government,
yes, of course,
by the next quarter, this should happen. The passengers should start running on it. So after you finish construction, you need to do testing. So you put the rail there, you ride it, you look at what are the hitches, are there some bolts I need to tighten, are there T's I need to cross, I's I need to dot. So there's a testing period. After the testing period, then you go live with passengers. So all these, construction is the main thing. Once construction is completed, the testing phase should not be anything that will be unduly elongated. So it is reasonable to believe that first quarter next year, this train will actually open to passengers.
And I want to see in bridging infrastructure deficit. Now, what do you think this will do to our roads when it becomes totally implemented?
This is the real excitement for me as a citizen of Lagos. I lived on the mainland. I work on the island. And I know what that means for every Lagosian who had to go through that door. People who live even on the other side of town are saying, even for you to go from that same island to another part of the island, the traffic will also be horrendous. So after you've worked in the office for so much hours, then you get back on that road. Third Mainland Bridge is just 7.3 miles, about 11.8 kilometers. There have been days when that road took 4 hours to navigate, 3 hours to navigate. Now, that has several implications for the cost profiles of individuals and corporates. When I take a journey that should be 30 minutes in 2 hours, I am spending 4 times on fuel. At 30 minutes, I take it in 2 hours. That is the fuel, there is the wear and tear on the vehicle, there is the health. We did not have 206 bones to be sitting down in a place. Nature expects us to be able to stand up, take a walk, and all the rest. But when you get behind the wheels, and for the next 34 hours, you're unable to get out of that wheel, it has health implications. These are even things that are even difficult to measure. Now, infrastructure like this, if we close it out, expand it, we can transform the lives of Lagosians. The transportation issue in Lagos is a major issue. And it will not only help businesses, it will help individuals' health as well.
At least, when there's less traffic, I agree with you. The manpower, time use in traffic and all of that, it's heavy indeed. So moving forward, this would one way or the other also impact even the entire economy. Productivity, people will be more productive.
There are people who live in some further part. I mean, I live closer. I live in Anthony Village. There are people who live further. 4:30, if they don't get up from their bed, they can't even get to the island in time.
What time do you now sleep?
So when do they get to sleep? In the evening, they face the same problem, traffic. But just imagine that we have this project now. This is just one. There are about 6 rail projects that are meant to be done in Lagos. So imagine that this one is able to actually pull out 400,000 commuters from that road.
Cars are up the road.
It is a huge, huge benefit for individuals, for businesses, anyhow you look at it. And the more we can expand it, the better. So there is the blue line now. Of course, there is a red line which is in the works. There are other lines. There is orange, there is purple. There are about 6 of them, yeah. So the more we open up all of those, there's a Chinese proverb that says, if you want to grow rich, build road first. And it wasn't referring only to just roads. It is a means to move both people and goods. If you do that, there's a picture on the 3rd page of the Vanguard today. All it showed was a truck carrying plantain on a good road. When I saw it, I just said, infrastructure. If you don't know how much of agricultural products we waste in this country because we can't get it from one point to the other, you will not be able to appreciate that.
That was already
picture.
running through my mind. The way we move our agricultural produce, the way we move our petroleum products, the way we move all of this. The rail can just come to our aid and help us address some of these issues.
Certainly.
If properly instituted across the country.
This is a passenger rail, meanwhile.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I agree.
But on a general basis.
On a general basis is what I'm now looking at.
Exactly.
Looking at what the federal government is also doing and all of that. Lagos seems to always want to be always first in things like this. What are your expectations more, particularly with this same themes agenda of Governor Sanwo-Olu?
I hope that we will be able to further this themes agenda because it was a properly thought through pillars to understand what the problems are and then begin to fix it. T is for the transport part, which is part of what we're fixing today. Yeah. Now, this is one step in the right direction. There are so many other things that we need to put together, even in that transport space. Lagos is surrounded by waters. So we need to do more in the water transport system. In fact, there has to be a keys between the rail and the water, and even the road, which is what I think that Marina hub is going to eventually translate to. There's water right there. The rail is going to terminate at that same point. Then there is also road. So the multimodal transportation, which is very essential to opening up Lagos, it might just be on the way to being born.
But let's use the opportunity to also talk to Lagosians who use these facilities because there's sometimes when people talk about we need this attitudinal change to understand that this is an investment that should be properly managed. What would you say to Lagosians, all of us that will use these services, so that we support government? Because some of these monies, one way or the other, like we said, they will be paid. They're on the bills of the state government.
Yes.
And you must meet up whatever agreement you have with your business people or with your partners, both local and international. What is your advice to Nigerians, particularly we focus on the way we use infrastructures, our infrastructures?
Lagosians must own the project, see it as their project, and therefore care for it the way anybody will care for his, car that he cherishes.
Yeah.
That should be our attitude. So issues of vandalism, I know because it is electric anyway, there are certain inbuilt safety issues that are involved on electricity-related things. So all the issues of safety too, we have to distill them into nuggets and educate the citizen. That is on the part of Lamata. They have to do that, especially when the train is going into operations. I know that there are already certain basic information when you go to the website, but it's not everybody in Lagos that will go to a website to fish out information. So that is why we have to distill certain information into smaller pieces, pungent, that you can distribute on radio, on TV, or whatever, to educate citizens' education, and it will go a long way to help.
It's really an interesting one, a good way to end the year for Lagos State, inaugurating this. Well, we'll keep a tab on them and see how all of this plays out. I'm just looking one way or the other if there are going to be any challenges that would need to face, but I think it's part of the ones we talked about now, the usage, maintenance, and all of that. And I think the international partners will still be on ground to do one or two things. A parting shot from you now. It's the end of the year, and I think maybe after this, our next discussion could be 2023. Like I told Dr. Onitu, it will be 2023. So, what is your message generally to everyone at this time? It's an election coming very soon.
Yeah, well, I think we should all endeavor to participate, to be part of that election.
True.
I wish I would vote, but most likely I know I will be on election duty, so contributing my own quota in another way. But for everybody, this is our game. This is our thing. Let's get out there, take your PVC, and vote. That is my message to